We are so glad that you're here today. Hi, there I am. My name is Ellie. I am the Director of Marketing Automation here at Enable. And so I'm just going to welcome you guys today. We're so glad that you're here for our first ever live panel discussion. So we have brought along some pastors and thought leaders from some of our own church clients. And so they have given us an hour of their day today and have thought through some of these questions that we're going to talk about today. And I'm just excited to hear their perspective, and I know you are too. So we're just excited to hear what their insight is and kind of what they've learned from the last 2 months, really, and what this new normal is going to look like. So I would love to introduce them. First, we have, let's see, we're going to go to the next slide. There it is. So first we have Michael Warren at Changepoint Church. So Michael, will you introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, well, first of all, a big good morning to everyone joining from the western end of the U.S. This is an early start for us. So if you're a West Coaster or even checking in from Alaska, good morning. I'm checking in from the land of the midnight sun, which means every day we're gaining daylight and headed toward sun at midnight, which is exciting for us Alaskans who are in what we call breakup, which means everything's melting, the ice is breaking up, and the sun is out. So good to join you this morning. I'm from Changepoint Church. Changepoint Church, I would say, is a ministry leader in our state and an innovator in our state. We have a church attendance of about 3,500 regular attenders on a Sunday. And I've been a member of this community in lots of different capacities for about the last 17 years. So love Changepoint, love Alaska, love Enable, and glad to be here today.
Awesome. We're so glad to have you too, Michael. And yeah, you're early. It's like 8 o'clock there. So we're glad you got up early for us today. Next, we have Jay Strotter, and he is at Brentwood Baptist Church. So Jay, tell us a little bit about you.
Yeah, good morning from Nash Vegas. We are just a little south of the Nashville metropolitan area. We're part of the Brentwood Baptist family of churches. We have 8 campuses that comprise that family. And so I oversee the South region, which is 3 of those campuses that are in the suburbs to the south, far south of Nashville. I've been on staff for about 18 and a half years. So I was the student minister, next gen minister, associate pastor, and then I started the first campus along with a great team of folks 10 years ago. So we're a multi-site church. Our campuses range in size from about 150 to the Brentwood campus, which is about 3,500. The campus where I'm the lead pastor, the church at Station Hill, we run about 1,600 on a typical Sunday, although numbers don't matter much anymore in this day and age. But it gives you an idea. We just work with a number of campuses in a number of different contexts. Each of them follow the same philosophy of ministry, but we allow each to contextualize to their neighborhood. So our model of multi-site is a little different than most, including that we have a teaching pastor at every campus. But that's where I serve as part of the Brentwood Baptist family. Good to see you guys this morning.
Awesome. Thanks, Jay. All right, next we have Jody Nisnik at Irving Bible Church. So Jody.
Hello, good morning. My name's Jody, and as you already said, I serve at Irving Bible Church. So Irving is right by the Dallas-Fort Worth airport, so we're in a real interesting part of the country. One of the interesting things about IBC and the zip code that we reside in is in the last census, we were actually designated as one of the most diverse zip codes in the United States. I'm not exactly sure how they measured it because technically we are more diverse than like Queens, New York. So it's an interesting thing about IBC. We run 1,800 on a Sunday. As you said, numbers are really different right now. And so our church is bigger than that. The people that call IBC home is definitely more than the people that show up on a Sunday, but and we're discovering that now. I've been on staff for about 12 years, and I've served in a ton of different roles on our staff. I'm our adult ministries pastor right now, which means I oversee men's and women's and our Sunday morning communities. And I also serve on our executive team. So.
We're so glad you're here today. And last but not least, we have Jeff Barber at Park Cities Presbyterian Church in Dallas. In Dallas.
That's right. Well, good morning. And so, Michael, I'm glad up your way, y'all are beginning to experience the thaw. I think we're supposed to be in like the mid 70s and sunny today in Dallas. So I hope that doesn't make you too jealous. But yeah, so again, welcome everybody. I appreciate everybody joining the call this morning. Again, I'm Jeff Barber, and I'm the Executive Director at Park City's Presbyterian Church here in Dallas. Been in this role now for about 14 years, so a part of the senior leadership team and working with our staff and our elders. We are, I think one of the things that's probably unique about us is that we're a rather traditional church in a very urban setting. We're kind of right in the heart of the city. We have a membership of about 4,600. And one of the interesting things too about PCPC is that we're multi-generational. We, as a matter of fact, looked at that a few months ago. It's just interesting that those in their 20s, in their 30s, in their 40s, all the way up to 70s and 80s, our membership is pretty well equally distributed among those generations. So that is a real gift to us. It also has some challenges to it. And certainly, even in the season like we're in now, those are some things that are just kind of significant for us to take into account. We're also in the middle of a big construction project, all the future vision and all the things that we've been thinking and praying and dreaming about. And so we know that all that is still really great stuff, but even some of those conversations, I think are appropriately being tempered a bit, just given the environment that we're in.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, great. Well, before we get started, just a little housekeeping. So we are recording this webinar and we'll post it first thing tomorrow, and you will get an email recording with it. So that's great. You can forward it to all your friends that weren't able to attend today. And you can also pause the webinar at any point if you needed to get up and, get another cup of coffee. And so you don't miss anything. So the navigation is on the left. Also, we will have time for a live Q&A at the end. So feel free to write your questions in the Q&A on the right. We are monitoring that, and we'll hope to get to as many as we can. So we're just going to dive right in. Our first question that we're going to go over today is this. So as your church reopens, what will your new normal look like? What expectations do you anticipate your congregation, staff, and volunteers having when we reopen the doors? So let's see. Jeff, why don't you kick us off with this question?
Well, sure. Well, we had a really interesting beginning to this whole journey. On March the 16th, I was made aware that one of our staff members had actually tested positive for COVID-19. And that actually led to discovering that there were 4 more staff in that same cluster. So we kind of started this whole journey with 5 staff members having tested positive, and then 2 of their spouses. And then outside of that cluster, there have been about at least 6 others that we know of in our congregation who have tested positive. Among all of those, 2 of those people actually ended up in the hospital. So fortunately, everybody has recovered quite well, and we're deeply grateful for that. But we, as I said, this journey had a very interesting beginning for us, and so it's obviously something that we've taken very seriously. Yet with all of that, now that we are kind of moving into this season of trying to understand what the new normal might be, there are a number of varied opinions and expectations among our congregation about what reopening looks like and how we should be thinking about it. Some, of course, are very conservative and not planning to return soon, even if we do open, where others, tend to fall to the other end of the extreme, thinking, maybe it's a little overblown and we're ready to get back to gathering. Our young families are like, okay, well, mask on our kids and we're ready to be there. We're just so hungry to be together. So our leadership is actually working with a task force. Our elders discussed again last night, virtually, of course, through a call, working with a task force. And we're really basically trying to understand what our members desire, as well as to stay informed of all the available information. And of course, our members expect that we'll take the matters very seriously and be very careful about it. Here in Texas, our governor's office has been very proactive. Our governor released last Monday a statement about phased reopening, and then the lieutenant governor invited church leaders into a conference call on Tuesday. There are about 700 people, I think, on that call, and so I really am so grateful that there's spirit in our state helping churches to re-engage as much as possible, but at the same time, really encouraging to not take any unnecessary risk, to continue live streaming as possible, just not letting our guard down. There's also a great community of churches in Dallas. I was on a call, I think last Thursday, with about 30 other executive pastors. And of those 30 churches represented, only 4 of those churches have actually decided to begin worshiping in the month of May, gathering again for worship in the month of May. And so, in our immediate, our neighboring churches right around us, we're trying to think about this collectively in terms of what's the best decision for our community as a whole, not just for individual churches, and also really what's the best the best testimony to the community. Obviously, people obviously watch the church and pay attention to how we respond to these things, and want to be sure we're doing that well. So probably reopen in early June, possibly by the end of May. We're in a position that we can do that. I think if we decide by say Memorial Day or something like that, and that would of course mean social distance and all of those issues, spacing, service times, and controlled entry, those kind of things. Family worship, not childcare, because the protocol around children's ministry would be pretty significant. So anyway, just for us, I think we know that our members are, will be expecting us to be very, very careful about how we approach this.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Anyone got anything to add? I love how you've kind of mentioned the government's or your governor's take on this, how they've been, super proactive in Texas. Anyone else got any thoughts on that?
Hey, this is Michael from Anchorage, Alaska. I just really appreciate a lot of what Jeff shared. We're in a very similar position, and two of the things that really resonated with me with what he shared was this idea that that the church is offering a testimony to our community. And one of the things I was really hoping to mention today was that there are some positive trajectories in terms of the relationships with important city organizations, with our city government, with our school district. And one of the variables, there's lots of variables, but one of the variables has been to consider the trajectory of those relationships and to lead in the context of community. And so I really appreciate that Jeff mentioned testimony. The other thing that I was thinking about when Jeff shared there was that there's a spectrum in our community of comfort, and there's also a spectrum of risk. And so as we think of that, for us, it felt like we had to literally flip a switch when we were asked to close, and all of these new kind of online platforms, we started to innovate quickly, and the switch was flipped, and all these new innovations are happening. And I think the other thing that we're aware of, again, nothing really conclusive, but the other thing that we're aware of is that it's not going to be a switch back to normal. And so, again, that may seem obvious given where we're all at, but I think there was a little bit of an aha for us in that, okay, we're going to have to think differently, because the switch that was flipped to get us in the spot that we're in now isn't going to get switched off the way it got switched on. So.
Absolutely. I think that is a great point. And I love that relationships are first, and that is why you all do what you do. So making sure that is top priority and that people come first. For the sake of time, we're just going to keep moving along. We've got a bunch more questions to get to. So the second question that we wanted to cover today with you guys, get your thoughts on it. What are the biggest challenges your church is facing as we transition into this new normal? So Michael, why don't you kick us off with this question? Yeah,
glad to. So one of the biggest challenges I think that we faced as a church was tied to our staff. We all came into, again, I'll use if the switch was flipped, we came into the switch flipping in terms of flipping to something new, with jobs and departments and lanes that we run in terms of our kind of ministries. And not that we're running church in some wooden way where we're just kind of looking at our job descriptions. I think in ministry, you become a specialist in many fields and many different things. Mm-hmm. But one of the challenges I think we faced is our staff needed to really switch to new jobs, and the process to discover the new things that each staffer was going to be getting involved in. And a lot of the new things that we find ourselves doing are skill and competency based, which is just interesting and new. We have people that have stepped into tech responsibilities, care responsibilities, and project management responsibilities that maybe they didn't have before. So first biggest challenge was just adjusting as a staff to kind of a new normal and kind of a new work day. Another big challenge I think that we're facing, there have been ongoing complexities and I'll call it trouble that we see in our body. We have people in our body that struggle with mental health issues and troubled marriages, kind of ongoing things that need an ongoing ministry touch. What we're facing as a community and as a nation has not helped the places that were already strained. And so what does it look like for the church to move toward the things that we're already concerned about and kind of are already complex and difficult? Mm-hmm. And then the third thing that I'll mention here is, and I feel like I'm all over the map, talking about staff, now I'm talking about like trouble in the body. But this third thing is just kind of a new thing that I think has been a challenge is how to understand the data. We're not, it's tricky in church leadership. We talk about data. We know that, it's not about numbers, but the numbers do teach us things and help us to understand things. It's hard to understand. It's hard to understand our church and the decisions they're making and why they're making those decisions. In Alaska, we call ourselves rugged individuals, and there's a new normal for rugged individuals. And so I think we're just really wondering if we're interpreting our data and information correctly, because we want to be responsive to the needs of our church, and we're just not quite sure exactly if we're looking at the right kind of variables and data. So anyway, three very different things, but definitely challenges.
I think that shows the complexity of this, that it impacts every area of our ministries. What else do you guys have to add?
I would add to that I think one of the things that we're really facing a challenge to, and we've already talked about it a little bit, and Michael, I loved how you called it the spectrum of comfort versus the spectrum of risk, is pastoring our people that are all over the map on what they are expecting of us. And so we're having to pastor people that are ready to be back in the building versus people that are like, no way, that's too soon. And so how do we care for, communicate clearly, give good reasoning for why we're doing what we're doing, and just bring people along. And I think that's a big challenge right now, because there is just this different level of tolerance. And we really have to learn how to be gracious with people and honor where they are. And that's everywhere right now. So I think that's another thing I'd add to that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Jody, I appreciate you sharing that, because one of the things that we've been trying to figure out is how do you give those people a voice? So just a practical suggestion, we put out a survey to our people last week. We're Nashville, so Lifeway Christian Resources provided one. We modified it. We sent it out. It's amazing. Usually you're really trying to beg people to take surveys. We've never received so much feedback so quickly. And so but a lot of people appreciated being able to weigh in. And what we discovered was kind of what we expected. There was about 10% of people like, I'm not coming back till there's a vaccine. There's 10% of people on the other end of the bell curve who are like, we should have been meeting yesterday. And about 80% of the people are somewhere in between, expecting us, to help lead them and guide them in what we do as we reopen church. So, but that survey was a great tool that just really helped give people a voice, and allowed them to feel appreciated and like, hey, okay, I can at least speak into this and help shape it in some way.
Yeah, good.
That's great. I mean, that's awesome. I think giving reasons why, y'all said so many great things that I think many people can glean from. And I love the use of technology there, using a survey to get perspective. So that's great. Moving right along, we've got a third question that we would love to address. What is your church's plan for ministry this summer, considering social distancing, people's fear, other health concerns? What does the community need from us right now and this summer? So Jay, what are you guys thinking over there at Brentwood Baptist?
Yeah, it's a great question because we are about to make that transition from kind of school year programming into summer. If I start generally, our phrase we've kind of adopted is we do want to open as soon as we can, but also as safe as we can. And so to Michael's great point about the spectrum of need, we're trying to communicate that there is an urgency. We are the church and we want to gather as soon as we can. And yet we stress to our people all the time, we don't go to church. You know, we are the church. We are the body. So there have definitely been some gifts during this time as well. As a church, we've had a conversation about what we've called future church for a long time, meaning how do we equip our people to think like missionaries in their own neighborhoods? You know, we send people across the seas, and rightfully so, to do missions, but are we as effective at sending people across the street? And so this has really just helped ramp that up in a sense for us to help drive home some of those things that we've been saying for quite a while. So as far as our plans go, like many of you, we have a task force. We've been working with government officials. Our governors here in Tennessee has issued just yesterday a set of documents that kind of helps us be able to put together our protocols and guidelines. So what we're allowing, because we're a multi-campus church, we actually have churches, facilities in 3 different counties, including one metropolitan area, that if a mayor says something, that trumps what the governor says. So we've got some complexities we're dealing with. So what we've done is provide a grid, thinking through service, cleaning, staff work weeks, all of the relevant details, what we're doing with Next Gen, kids ministry, those kind of things. And each campus is going to submit to the leadership team a proposal for opening. The earliest for us would be after May 29th. That's when our shelter at home ends right now in the state of Tennessee. So that's one thing we're doing. Each campus is going to phase it in the way that's appropriate for that campus, but with the central support from our church-wide body that they need. As far as summer activities, we just went ahead and said things like Vacation Bible School are not going to happen as normal. Instead, we're looking at 2 options. One, kind of a virtual equipping online, but also really encouraging our people to consider, by the time we get into July, the Backyard Bible Club model, where they reach out to their neighbors. Of course, that'll be based on is the numbers safe, that kind of deal. But we're really trying to equip our people to be the church out in the community rather than depending on us and our staff. Michael talked about the challenge with staff. We're trying to help them pivot to, you know, you're Ephesians 4, you're an equipper of the church for acts of service so that the body is built up. So our staff is spending a lot of time, you know, filming and doing Zoom calls, equipping leaders to go out into the community. Of course, we've had to postpone most camps and retreats and mission journeys and those kind of things like most of you have had, but we're trying to figure out how do we take this time and redirect it during this season.
That's awesome. I would love to hear what the rest of y'all have to add to that.
So as far as Vacation Bible School, we're doing exactly the same thing, planning for virtual for now, but if by the time comes, we can actually flip over to like a Backyard Bible Club model, and then that's our plan there as well. You know, we're also exploring how we actually gather our body within their more specific communities, not just talking about small group ministry, but, you know, is it possible that, you know, 20 or 30 people can gather? And can an elder be responsible, or one of our pastors be responsible for shepherding that? So we don't know the answer to it yet. We do want to be as intentional as we can about gathering. And this is really, for us, something we've worked toward, thought about, had a burden for a long time. This is a huge catalyst for us to really press into not just small group ministry, but really more communities within our body gathering in their geographic community, and this being a great opportunity and a catalyst to try to push that forward over the summer. If we are still limited from our more, you know, our regular larger gatherings.
Yeah, we're talking about a lot of that same stuff too, you know, thinking through how we had to phase out. You know, we went from large group, okay, now you can meet as a medium, now you meet as a small, and really that's how we think we'll phase back in as well. And so we're planning in this summer, much like everyone else is, how can we gather smaller groups of people? And I love what you guys are thinking at Park City too, because we're thinking the same stuff, Jeff, is can we gather as communities in a park? Okay, so I live in a different city than where Irving Bible Church is, but could the people from my city gather in a park and worship together, socially distanced? And so there's a way to kind of create community, be the church together, and not actually go to the physical building and try to all be in that space together. Because we're all four of us are large churches, and it's going to be a long time before we can do that. So what are some creative ways that we can gather back together?
Mm-hmm. That's great. And I love what you guys said, like going back to the heart of, going out into our communities, meeting our neighbors and getting to know them, being the missionaries to the people that, we do life with, 20 feet from us. So I think that that's super intentional. And this time has allowed us to do that. So we could talk so much about that and kind of the good that's come from the scariness, but maybe that's another webinar that we can do. All right, another question we would love to talk about today is kind of in regards to your staff. So what is your plan for bringing your staff back into the office? What adjustments will you make for social distancing? Jody, why don't you kick this off?
Yeah, so our plan for bringing our staff back in office is to continue to follow city government, even our school district guidelines. What are the government organizations around us recommending and doing? Technically, we could already open the building back up to staff, being socially distanced and all of that stuff. And yet we aren't doing that. And there's a lot of reasons. One of the main reasons is we have to consider that all of the normal structures that support our parents are gone. So if you have children, there's the normal childcare structures of school or camps or things like that just aren't happening. And so we're, as we continue to move forward, really needing to honor not only where our staff is, but what kind of support they're going to need to come back into the office. And the other thing too is realizing that some of our staff actually don't need to be physically on campus. They can do their work effectively from home. And so balancing, okay, who needs to be physically in the building? Who needs to be at home? Can we reduce the number of staff that come into the building, maintain social distancing, wear masks if that's appropriate? So doing all of those guidelines and just also really honoring where people are. There's again, it's that same spectrum. Our staff are on that spectrum as well. And so how do we honor, can you do your work effectively and efficiently and do it remotely? And I also think we have to realize one of the good things that have come out of this is we've all learned how to use this skill of working at home and using this technology. And I think that's going to stick around. There's going to be some sort of hybrid work situation that I think will carry forward. I don't know exactly what that'll look like, but I think we've entered into a new way of working, a new expectation for how we work, and so we want to keep exploring that.
Yeah. What about the rest of y'all? How has your church experienced this whole transition and new norm? I guess with working from home. Has it been okay? Has your staff enjoyed it? Jody, especially y'all, have y'all enjoyed it for the most part?
I would say there's been a varying level of enjoyment versus, like, there are some people that are just, and they've got kids at home and they would love to get into the office again. They would love to just get some quiet space to do some work in a different way. Yeah. So, there are so many different varying needs and opinions. Some people just are kind of feeling like they're stir crazy, stuck at their home, and maybe they don't have kids at home, but they just would really love a different work environment. So, I think there's all kinds of different responses to that.
Of course, our extroverts are just like, can't wait to get back together. I think too, for me, from my perspective and from my responsibility, I just feel this extraordinary burden that I can't connect with my staff enough. We're doing everything we can, pushing out videos, and, we'll have an all staff meeting again Wednesday. And, big screen full of faces, but I just can't walk through the halls or pop in somebody's office, and that just, kind of breaks my heart to not really be able to do that. So I think it is making me just not value people for the way I've valued them in the past, but it just so really forges again the significance of what it is to be a part of the body of Christ, and then as a staff, called to a shared vision and a shared ministry together. Boy, I miss that connection.
Yeah, Jeff, to jump on there for just a second, I think you make a great point, is we should feel a sense of loss, right? It's about relationships, and you can't replace that virtually. At the same time, even myself, I'm trying to learn. You talk about connecting with staff and others. I went old school. I have a little yellow notepad and a little moleskin. And when somebody pops to mind, I'm just writing down their name, and the first chance I get, I'm calling, texting, email, doing something to connect with that staff member or even a church member. And I found, boy, that has opened up some real doors to minister to my staff, but also to people in our congregation, just because they appreciate that in this time when we have a little more margin than I normally do to do that sort of thing. It's meant a lot to people because, the one thing we're going to have when this is all over is relationships. And so we've got to use this time to continue to nurture those. And when you reach out during this season, it really is, people feel like you're going the extra mile to connect with them, and they appreciate that.
Man, I love that. I really do. And I love how, Jeff, you mentioned just your perspective change, or maybe Jay, you mentioned it too. And what else did I, just honoring the flexibility of your people, even when we get back to this. I think remembering we're all human. We're all on the same team here is something, kind of a theme that I've seen as well. So that's great. I love that perspective. All right, our fifth question is kind of along the lines of logistics. We'd love to know, what indicators will determine when you will go back into the office and reopen on site? What's your ideal timeline for reopening, and how are you determining your timeline? Michael, what about you guys up in Changepoint?
Yeah, thanks. And, some of what Jody shared really kind of touched on this just a little bit in terms of logistics. She seemed to mention when she was sharing a little bit of that it's going to be gradual and it's going to be tiered. And I think so that's, I don't know what the exact timeline is going to be, but it's going to be gradual and it's going to be tiered. And I think it's going to be leveraging a couple of things. It's going to be leveraging space, and it's also going to be leveraging the vehicles that we believe that God has already led us to. And I want to explain that. So in terms of space, again, we're at the Raspberry campus. We're a large enough number that we're going to need to think through how and what we're going to encourage people to do in terms of gathering in smaller spaces leading up to coming back to the main campus. And so I would imagine what is that going to mean? It's going to be backyard fire pits. It's going to be driveways. It's going to be the church parking lot. It's going to be kind of tailgate style. And when I say the vehicles that we've already feel like God has already led us to, I would guess that people will continue to use the tools, the technology, the tools that we've already kind of innovated and have built and have felt called to build, just maybe consuming them or participating in them in smaller groups before we get back to kind of doing it all together in the same space. So it might be, taking communion together, and worshiping together with your small group. It might equal going out and serving somebody in our body in need, that needs a meal, or that needs some encouragement, or needs maybe some yard cleanup work, and then maybe doing that together. And so, again, I think it's going to be gradual and tiered in terms of the numbers of people and the kind of numbers tied to gathering, and probably doing the things that we're already kind of called to do. So thinking through how can we do the things that we believe God's called us to do in terms of vision, mission, values, but doing them in kind of smaller numbers. So gradual and tiered, probably smaller to bigger. And one of the benefits that I believe that we have is that we have some other campuses. We have one of our campuses is in Kotzebue, which is a Native Alaska village off the road system in rural Alaska. We have one of our campuses, the Takotnu campus, they meet in a school. And we have our Matsu campus, which does not currently have a home. There's looking for kind of a property. And so one of the benefits I believe that we have is that we're going to be able to look to these smaller versions of us in these other campuses and kind of start with the smallest and kind of learn from those different communities. And that's something that I believe has helped us in the first part of this season, is really looking to other churches in our community and doing things like this, getting on webinars, listening to other church leaders, and then putting it through the middleware of like, okay, we think that's a good idea. What does it look like for us to be us and to do something like that? And so all said, this is a season where we're really listening and kind of watching. So
what about the rest of you that have maybe, I loved your point on your multi-campuses. Any of y'all kind of going to glean from that as well? Do any of y'all have multiple campuses? I'm not even sure. No, a few of them. Jay, I think you guys do at Brentwood.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, one of the unique things I mentioned earlier is just that our campuses they vary in size, demographics, even counties. And so, we're to Michael's point, we're going to learn from the guys on the front lines, and we're going to let each, just like we allow them to contextualize ministry to some degree, we're going to allow each one to tell us what the needs are. And, we didn't have much time to talk about it earlier, but that was one of the things that you mentioned was that question, what does our community need from us? So we're trying to help our people to think pray with their eyes open, as we call it. What are the needs there? You may have some neighbors with some, a struggling marriage or a mental health issue, or, they have lost their job. What are the needs that you can help meet during this season? And how can you be the church, be proactive in that? And that's one of the big paradigm shifts I think we're going to see, is that the idea that ministry is done by professionals versus ministry being put back into the hands of the laity during this time. And so how do we, as I mentioned earlier, repivot a lot of our staff and our thinking to think our buildings and our programs are good and they have their place, but the church, can function without those. So how do we redeploy our staff and our key lay leaders to be those equippers who go out into those communities and push that down? And how does that restructure then what it looks like for our meetings and our time together as a staff?
That's so good. And I think what Michael said too, and kind of you, Jay, you touched on it, it's a progression, right? We're not just going to jump right in. So I think everyone can be comforted with that gradual tiered approach, right? I think that can bring a lot of comfort to everyone that's on here. It's not just, in the way that it stopped so suddenly, it's not going to just start suddenly again. It's a process for everyone.
And I think Jody mentioned grace earlier. Man, we just are going to have to extend a lot of grace to each other, people with different opinions. Another webinar I was on, a great suggestion was made to produce some kind of a video that just kind of lets people know what to expect, because otherwise it's going to feel real awkward that first Sunday. So we're going to try to get out ahead of it, produce a video. Here's what's okay to do. Here's what we're going to refrain from doing right now, just for the comfort of others. Again, we're trying to go real basic. We want to love God well, but let's love our neighbor well as well.
I love that. What to expect. Isn't that just the key to everything? Setting expectations. Yes. In marriage and, everything.
Yeah. Great principle.
Great principle. Great. Well, our final question before we get to the live Q&A, and I've been seeing them pop in, we've gotten some good questions. So our last one we wanted to address is what lessons are you taking from your mandatory stay-at-home experience that will impact the shape of your ministry moving forward? What changes do you think will be permanent for your church? Jody, what about you guys?
Yeah, so I think there are a couple of lessons that we have learned. The first is, I think our entire church body has learned their deep need for community. We have seen a lot of our unconnected IBCers longing for community. And so we've started virtual small groups, and we've launched, over 10, 12 of those. And, these are people that are just committing to meeting for the first time online. And so I just think that this expression of, gosh, we are sorry we've waited this long. And so I think there's this deep need for community. We're kind of leveraging some of these online tools to help create that. But I think when we come back in, we're going to be able to really pastor and shepherd our people toward understanding more why they need to make that sacrifice in their life to have the community that they're longing for right now. So that's one thing. The other thing I think is we have learned how to be creative again. I think as many of us tend to do, we find something that works and we just kind of keep repeating that same thing that has worked. And there's not really been a need to force change. And so this has actually really just kind of put us in this crucible moment where we've had to break out of all the molds of how we used to do things and try some new things. And the beautiful gift in this is that everybody's willing for you to try something and it not work. That's okay in this season. So there's this kind of nimbleness in this season where we can actually try something. And if it doesn't work, we just try something different the next time. So I think those are two things that we've learned as far as like what we'll carry forward. Some of that creativity is that we have, like I said, figured out how to do small groups online. We do like a Facebook Live devotional every morning at 8:30. It's mainly led by our senior pastor, but we're reading through books of scripture and just 10, 15 minutes, he's leading us through a conversation around that. And that's starting everybody's day. And we're seeing a lot of IBCers connect real time, commenting, sending prayer requests. And so there's just this real time community that's being created every day. We're doing a midweek, our discipleship team put together this midweek reset for your soul, where we're doing a spiritual practice together. So we're creating these moments for IBCers to kind of come together live virtually and experience something together. And I think a lot of that's going to carry forward. I think another thing that we're learning how to do is that we used to kind of use social media as an opportunity to push content out. And now we're really seeing it as actually a place to engage with people. And so we're learning as a staff how to not only push content out, but then how to remain engaged, to respond to people, to not let somebody just put something out there and not respond to it. So we've learned how to do this conversation online, and that's also something we'll carry forward. That's been a really great learning for us.
That's awesome. That's really awesome. Love the flexibility and being creative. Anyone else have anything to add to that?
Yeah, it's a quick comment too. So I think Jody, like you all, for us, just really understanding some of the practical outcomes of this, how to really help our body connect in ways that, we really haven't in the past. And then I would say too, one of the things I'm just thinking about personally, and we're thinking about as a church is, how do we want to be different on the other side of this? What does it really mean to thrive? I've been thinking for myself and a bit for the church, what does it mean to be a little less Martha and a little more Mary? And I think Martha gets a bad rap. I don't mean to, label Martha unfairly there, but I think you get the point. And, for us, it's really deciding, okay, when things do become normal, whatever normal is again, are we just going to rush right back in and do all the same things? And I really hope that we don't. Yeah. I really hope that we, seek the Lord for what must we do. These were just 3 good questions given to me recently. What must we do? What should we do if we can? And what may we do if we have the opportunity and the resources? And so we're just kind of working through that from a leadership standpoint to kind of prepare ourselves for, what a new normal might be, not just only from the practical elements we're taking away from this and how to gather our body, but also just the opportunity for really the refinement around the vision and what the Lord's really calling us to. So maybe I'm speaking more from my own heart because those are questions I'm asking myself, but I think it's good for us to ask that as a body as a whole.
Yeah, Jeff, I think to that point, there's these 2 New Testament words for time, not to get all theological, but there's chronos, right, which is the time of the watch. What time is it? And then there's the word kairos, or what's this time for? And so we're really trying to help our families and our staff ask that question, right? We're usually on the tyranny of the urgent. My wife actually embraced the fact that our May calendar was, it's been wiped clean because we've joked that May is the new December with graduations and end of school year and trend. It's so hectic. And all of a sudden, instead, we have this time. So what are we supposed to do with it? So one example of something we want to continue to push is for years, we've challenged our parents to not just leave discipleship discipleship to the church, but to engage their kids in the home in devotionals and worship time and just, just engaging them in general because their lives are so outsourced. Well, now parents are in essence having to, if the discipleship is going to take place, they have to take the lead, and with our team providing the resources and the online tools and things to help them. But we've seen a real uptick in parents saying, hey, I can do this. I can talk to my kids about the Bible. I can pray with my kids. And so we're praying that some of those things will continue. This season will be a real catalyst as everybody kind of steps back and says, wait a minute, what really matters, to your point, Jeff? Not only our must-do, should-dos, and nice-to-dos, but what do we stop doing that we didn't really need all along, but we were just going along with the flow of our culture?
That's so good. That is so good. Thanks for explaining those I couldn't say those words if I tried, the 2 words you just said for time, but loved that little lesson that we got this morning. We've got a ton of questions. I'd love for us to get to them. You guys have been great. So we're just going to I'll just kind of ask them, and then first one to speak, Caroline will put you guys up on the screen. So first question we had, are you anticipating budget shortfalls this year? How are you encouraging giving when so many are suddenly in a difficult financial position?
Well, I can speak to that, I guess. We are anticipating this. I think we all should be. Our congregation has been incredibly generous and faithful right now. And so we are doing everything we can on our end to use our resources really wisely. Because a lot of ministries stopped, we've actually stopped. It's not that the ministry stopped, but a lot of our programming has stopped. We've stopped spending money the way we were previously. And I'm sure we're all experiencing that as well. But one of the things that we're doing to kind of keep our congregation aware of what's going on is our senior pastor just released actually a video last night that was a giving update to let people know, hey, here's where we are, here's what we're doing. We were actually just about ready to enter into a major remodeling of our building. And so we're seeking our congregation right now to speak into our kind of where are you on that spectrum? Are you, that money's in the bank, it's set aside, we're getting the plans back. I mean, we were like right on the edge of pulling the trigger on it. So do we go ahead or not? And we want to include the body in that decision, but we're sending out as much information as we can to keep people in the know of where we are and inviting them continually. Here's how you continue to be a part of this. This is why we need you to continue giving. Here's the online platform. You can mail a check. So we're just trying to continually communicate where we are and how they can be a part of where we're giving. And I'll tell you, one of the most encouraging things that we have seen at IBC is that we have had 60 new givers in this last month. And that is like pretty significant compared to where we would normally find ourselves. Now, I mean, maybe people were giving cash and we just had no idea how to track them, but people are willing to enter into that relationship with us. 60 new people doing that. And that's been really encouraging and significant.
That's great. Very encouraging. Thanks for taking that one, Jody. We'll move on unless someone else has anything to add. Great. So the next one we got, when your church reopens, will your church provide the PPE for staff and church members during services? If so, are you prepared to meet the quantity requirements?
I can speak to that a little bit. It's going to be based on the governor's decision or your local mayor's decision at that level. For us right now in Nashville, it looks like that our staff and volunteers will be required to wear masks and take temperature checks, but we won't have to do that with people entering the doors. And so it's wise to be as proactive as you can right now, securing those items if you possibly can.
Mm-hmm. Great. Thanks, Jay.
Yeah. To my earlier point too, I think you're just going to also have to help people understand, some people don't want to wear a mask at all. Some people really want to wear masks, and you're just going to have to give grace and again, explain that, over communicate during this time that you're trying to do what's best for all, based on, the regulations and protocols that we've been given, trying to be good citizens and good neighbors.
Yeah, absolutely. Setting good expectations yet again. So we've got two kind of along the tech component of kind of opening back up. So I'm going to ask like 3 questions and kind of just answer kind of what hits with you guys. Do you plan to keep all the tech forward components in place in your new normal? Are you worried continued live streaming might impact attendance and engagement? What tools, innovations that churches are currently using do you think will persist even after churches return to a more normal way of meeting together? Those are great questions.
Yeah, this is Michael in Anchorage. I'd love to take a crack at this one. We have an innovation that's working that I'm kind of excited to share. We call it Operation Help, and it's a way that we've been able to leverage our database and our website to network the needs of our community. So that the needs of our community can be met by our community. And it just reminds me of a lot of what Jay was talking about in terms of like putting ministry in the hands of the people and every kind of this, maybe every member a minister kind of perspective. And right now, that kind of needs board is for prayer, basic needs, encouragement calls, things that I think really fit kind of the COVID-19 campaign is kind of what we're calling it. So in Operation Help, somebody that has a need can basically make that need known. Then behind the scenes, our database does this thing to match that need with a vetted leader within our church community to go and meet that need. And then we get report backs on basically how many needs have been met, what kind of needs are they. And as we've watched this work, we've reflected that this is something we may just want to keep, either to use for a natural disaster or another kind of context like this one comes up, or just to keep it on so that we can continue to have people networked for need. So that's something we've kind of innovated in this season, and we're thinking this will probably stay with us. Yeah, the other thing I wanted to mention is this question about kind of continued live streaming and how it would impact attendance and kind of the legacy things that come along with keeping these kind of online platforms going. I like that we would keep our online services and some of the online platforms going because of the spectrum that we've been talking about in terms of people's comfort and people's risk. So in this on-ramp of back to normal kind of meeting, I love that we would keep the online opportunities going, and that would help us to kind of minister along that spectrum. And what's interesting about this question is we're having conversations as fresh as to yesterday and probably today about online church and ecclesiology and what is an online campus and what would be the end game, the end result. And but we're asking that question because we're finding that people are checking into our online opportunities from all over the world. And so it feels particularly jazzy and exciting, and we're just kind of wondering, okay, so what's the long-term plan here? So I think it's a good question, and some ecclesiology comes in here in terms of what is the church and should we continue to have an online campus? So good question, and we're asking it too. So
yeah, and Michael, to that point, I think that most churches are going to keep some kind of online expression now for that very reason. Certainly until there's some kind of a vaccine, there's just certain populations and demographics that are only going to feel comfortable online. And so whether or not we're trying to wrap our mind around an online campus approach as well, but regardless, the question, and it's going to be a whole new, I think, area of development and innovation for the church, is how do you take that virtual community and turn it into true biblical community? Like Jody mentioned, many of our online groups, we're seeing 100% attendance, which we've never seen before, because everybody's home and hungry for community. We're seeing new groups started. And so can you take and leverage that hook, why people are tuning in from around the world, and turn that into a disciple making experience, and as well as motivate those people to serve and be the church where they're located. So it's scary and exciting at the same time.
Definitely. Thanks for that insight, guys. That's great. We got 2 more questions and a couple more minutes. How are you approaching traditional group activities this summer, like camps and VBS? What other changes are you seeing for next gen engagement? We kind of had already talked about VBS and camps this summer. Maybe you can reshare those thoughts, and anything else y'all wanted to add?
I just want to say real quickly that the same platforms that the school has been using to deliver content is the same platform that we've been using to deliver content. And we found that there's a little bit of fatigue there for students in terms of another Zoom meeting. And so we're really, I was talking with one of our student leaders last night about this, and I think their desire is if it's not camp and VBS, it's got to be something, it's something together. So just want to put that out there.
Yeah, that's a good word, Michael. I know, if we go back to the worship question, I think most of us are looking at family worship experiences for the summer, simply because the protocols for social distancing with like 3-year-olds, it's impossible to keep. Not only that, another good question that we have moving forward is a lot of our senior adults, some of those people in the vulnerable groups are the volunteers and the key leaders in those ministries. Mm-hmm. So one thing we're going to have to be ready to consider is how that's going to look different when we come back as well. But to Michael's point, we're seeing some Zoom fatigue with a lot of our folks, especially even my own daughters. And so how can you, again, break that down into, your student ministry, into small groups, meeting in parks, into going out to serve neighborhoods together? What social aspects can you keep while keeping the protocols in place?
It's great. It's a hard question. It's a hard thing to make those calls and make those decisions. So that's good. Last question that we have for today. Your staff is serving congregation in the midst of a crisis, as well as taking care of their families and maybe fighting their own anxieties. How are you caring for your staff and making sure they aren't burning out? It's a great question.
Yeah, I think we've talked about how, it's already really been mentioned, just connecting with our staff and reaching out to them and making sure that we, are in kind of close contact with people. I can't remember who said it, but like jotting down the name and then, letting the Spirit kind of stir us to reach out to certain people, sending notes of encouragement, and just making sure that everybody's kind of staying on target with the people that report to them, and then so how we're doing it is, I've got people that are kind of in my staff team, checking in with them regularly. And then at our executive team level, just sharing, how's everyone doing? How's morale? What's going on? At our all staff meeting, which is, the big Zoom meeting, just praying together, continuing to just be in contact with each other. But it's tough. And it's easy to hide in this season, right? It's easy to do it's much easier in 2-dimension to hide that you aren't doing well than when we're in physical presence with each other. And so I think a lot of that is just really depending on the Lord to like I said, to just kind of stir us to pursue someone, ask the right questions, and just listen and be available.
Yeah. I totally agree. And Jody, you said it earlier, just honoring their flexibility that they need to do as parents and, work, people that work and,
yeah. And I was going to say, and it's tough because there's still expectations of work and ministry that has to be done. And how do you balance that? This is totally new territory for us. Right. So.
Absolutely. Well, these were hard questions, but good questions that we're all answering and, trying to figure out. And so I thank each of you guys for your time today and for your vulnerability to answer these hard questions and kind of put yourself out there and maybe not knowing the answer. We kind of said at the beginning, maybe we don't know the answers to some of these questions, and that's okay. So I think y'all helped put some people's minds at ease today. And so I thank y'all for your time, and thank you all for joining for your awesome questions. We will go on and wrap up. So you will see that email coming in tomorrow, and you'll get a link to the recording and share it with all your friends. And once again, we just thank each of you for being on here. Thank you, Jay, Michael, Jody, and Jeff. So we will wrap up. Everyone go have a great rest of your day.